Welcome back, everyone. In this lecture, we're going to talk about data input and output with pandas. So pandas can read a variety of tabular data formats. Keep in mind, for this course, we're pretty much going to provide all the data for you in CSV files located under the data folder. If you're actually looking to connect to your own data sources, please refer to the documentation online. So you can see here that if you were to look up the documentation online, there's a whole wide variety of data sources that pandas can both read from and write to. So it can read from CSV, JSON files, HTML files, Excel files. It can interact with SAS, SQL, Google BigQuery, etc. So if you actually just do a Google search for pandas IO, it will take you to the link where I got this table from, and you'll notice that each of these read and write functions, which essentially read and to, all of those have the capability to show you lots of different parameters, like what passwords you need to pass in, how to connect to the internet, etc. So if you're dealing with your own data sources, we can't really help you with that. Instead, look up in the documentation the various descriptions for reading and writing. What we're going to do here is we're just going to go through a couple of very basic examples. We'll go ahead and show you how to read from CSV, from Excel, and from HTML. And throughout the rest of the course, we pretty much just provide a simple CSV file that works just fine for our use cases. Okay, let's go ahead and work through a few examples of Panda's capability to read in data. All right, before we get started working with the Jupyter Notebook, I wanted to point out that inside your Pandas folder that comes with the course material and notebooks, here, where the data input and output notebook is, there's two files, example.csv and Excel sample.excel spreadsheet, essentially. And if you click open the data input and output, it looks like this, and it has some code for you to follow along with if you want to reference that code. Keep in mind, some of the methods we're going to use here may not work if you have a firewall or if you don't, or if you're not using our environment file. So there's some more information about that as far as like what libraries you need to install if you can't access the internet, or what libraries you need to install if you actually want to read from an Excel spreadsheet. So keep that in mind. There's actually a lot more information in this notebook. But really, all we need to know is how to read from a CSV file. So we're going to come back here, and I'm first going to import pandas as PD. And then what's absolutely crucial when opening a file with pandas is that you know the location of your notebook and the location of the file. To figure out the location of the notebook, simply type pwd into a cell and run it. And this will report back your current location. So note here, this is the current location of my notebook. And now what I want to do is I want to read in a file. To do that, I simply say pd.read_csv, and then I have two options. One option is to place the file that I'm looking for in the exact same location as shown here in pwd. So in my use case, I'm right now located in this untitled notebook, and the CSV file happens to be in the same location as my notebook. It is currently in this directory. So that means I should just be able to type out the name of the file, and if you're doing this correctly, you should be able to tab autocomplete this, run that, and now we see our data frame. Let's imagine my notebook was in a different location. If that's the case, then I need to provide the entire file path to the actual CSV file, which is quite simple after you've done pwd, because you can see the format you need to type it in. So let's imagine this notebook was located on another folder, another directory on my computer. All I need to do in that case is type out the full file path to wherever this CSV file happens to be. So it would look something like this, except maybe it's located under downloads for you because you never moved out of downloads. So keep that in mind. If you get an error saying file not found, then go ahead and type out the full file path to the actual location of the CSV file. So if I run this, I'll get back the same results. Okay, so if I were to misspell this file, for example, I'm going to say misspell here, run that, you'll get a file not found error. So if you're getting a file not found error when you're running this, please triple check what directory your notebook is currently in and what directory the CSV file or whatever file you're trying to read in is. They either need to match up or you provide the entire file path. Okay, so if I say example.csv, I can set this as a data frame, run that, and here I have my data frame. So that's how to read in from a CSV file. That's pretty much what we do throughout the course. If you ever do operations on this data frame and then want to save it, so for example, let's say I made a new data frame. So we'll say new df is equal to df, and I only want columns A and B. So here's my new data frame, and after doing my operations, I want to save this off of the data frame. Note, this is off the data frame, not off of PD. I say to, and then I hit tab. I have lots of options here. If I want to save it to a CSV file, if I do shift tab, you'll notice there's tons of different parameters. The main ones we need to care about is just simply what you're going to call this file. So I can say my new.csv file. So that's going to be saved at the current location, which we can find out using pwd. If you want to save it somewhere else, simply provide the entire file path of where you want it saved. And then what you should say is index equal to false if you don't want to save your actual index. So my index here is numerical 0, 1, 2, 3. That's the default pandas index. I don't want to save it, so I'll say index is equal to false. If the index is valuable information like ABC or the name of states or something, then you can set index equal to true. This is basically just saying, do you or do you not want to also save this index information in this CSV file? Okay, so that's how we can read in CSV files. We can also read in Excel files. We can say pd dot read Excel, and then you pass in your Excel spreadsheet, and then you also pass in the name that you want to, or the sheet name. So it can only take in one sheet at a time. So we say sheet 1, that's inside this Excel sample. Run this, and you should get back something that looks like this. You may or may not have the unnamed, depending on how you're running this. If you have this unnamed, that's essentially the saved index. So this is essentially what to show you what happens if you set index equal to true. If you do that and then try to read it in again, you'll get this kind of weird unnamed column, which is essentially just a duplicate of that original index 0, 1, 2, 3. So we can actually drop that if we wanted to by saying df, read that in, check my df, and then I can drop that unnamed 0, and whoops, make sure if we want to ever check the name of the columns, we can simply say columns. So here we have unnamed 0. Let's go ahead and copy that. We'll say df drop, and oh, my arrow was simply along the wrong axis. Axis equal to 1, and there we go. Okay, so that's how you can read it in Excel. Basically, you point out where the Excel file is, and then the name of the sheet you're interested in. Keep in mind, if it's a really complicated Excel spreadsheet with like different colors or macros or different formulas in it, Pandas may not be able to read it. It can really only read simple tabular spreadsheets that are similar to a Pandas data frame. Finally, I want to show you that Pandas can read table tabs off of HTML. So if you're familiar with HTML, you can know that HTML has different tags for different object types. And if we actually scroll down in the provided notebook and go to this link, so I'm going to kind of highlight this and then say go to with Google. This is the FDIC's list of failed banks. So you can notice that if I were to check the source, so view page source here, and this is really only for people that are familiar with HTML. If you keep scrolling down, eventually you'll see that there's table tags. So there's a table here. So if we really zoom in closely, you'll notice that there's table tags here, table headers, IDs, etc. So Pandas can actually attempt to try to read all this. So the way that works is the following. And there's kind of a multi-step process to it. You simply say my list of tables, or whatever you want to call this particular object, and say pd read HTML, and then pass in that string. Whoops, let's go ahead and copy it one more time. So it's right here. I'm just going to copy that entire string, and then go ahead and paste it in, run that, and depending if you have a firewall or internet issue, Pandas may or may not be able to read this. So you may need to install separate libraries, or you may need to check your firewall. So keep that in mind. In my case, it worked out. So I'm going to say my list of tables. And then if we actually check the type of this, you'll notice that it's a list, because what Pandas attempted to do was read every single table that it could find off of this HTML. So if we check out my list of tables, what we can do is check the length of it. And it looks like Pandas only found one table, which makes sense. If we take a look at the original website, there really only is one table here. So what Pandas ended up doing, if we come back to our untitled, is our data frame is equal to the first item in that table, which is why we have this extra step here. And then if I take a look at my data frame, here I have the information: bank name, city, certification number, etc., and all that information. Okay, so that's how we can read from HTML, Excel files, and CSV. And for our course, really, we're just going to be reading from CSV most of the time. Thanks, and I'll see you at the next lecture.